We will take a picture assisted by the ASEAN-IPR Secretariat. Ms. Lilianne Fan, if you could activate your camera. Okay, I will ask my colleague to count down. In 3, 2, 1. One more, please. In 3, 2, 1. Thank you very much, Excellencies. Ladies and gentlemen, let's begin our webinar this afternoon. We are pleased and honored to have the moderator of this discussion, Her Excellency Ms. Yuyun Wahyuningrum, the representative of Indonesia to the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights, or AICHR. Ms. Wahyuningrum has an extensive experience on human rights in Southeast Asia, working in various local and regional organizations on this issue. She worked on the issue of trafficking in persons with the American Center for International Labor Solidarity and Terre de Homes, Netherlands. She was the East Asia Program Manager of Forum Asia on 2008 to 2009 and the Policy Advisor on ASEAN for Oxfam in 2009 to 2010. She is a Senior Advisor on ASEAN on ASEAN and Human Rights for the Human Rights Working Group Indonesia since November 2010 and the Country Coordinator for the Center of R2P since October 2014 until now. She is also the Advisor for Human Rights to the ASEAN Parliamentarian for Human Rights, APHR, since 2014. She was the team leader of the Regional EU-ASEAN Dialogue Instrument, or READY, Human Rights Facility from August 2015 to January 2017. Ms. Wahyuningrum has a Master of Arts degree on Human Rights and Development from Mahidol University and is currently a PhD researcher in the International Institute of Social Studies of Erasmus University, Rotterdam, the Netherlands. Without further ado, Ms. Wahyuningrum, I now hand over the discussion to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Kartika, for that generous introduction. Excellency Bapak Igusti Wesaka Puja, Executive Director of the ASEAN Institute for Peace and Reconciliation, participants, speakers. We have about 2 hours and 10 minutes for this session, and will be divided into 2 sections. Section 1 consists of the presentation of the speakers, and then another 60 minutes is for question and answer. So please prepare your questions or comments perhaps in the platform provided by the organizer. Today we have 3 respected and eloquent speakers and who are very expert in their field. Her Excellency Ms. Kheng Samvada, Dr. Gloria Jumamil Mercado, and Ms. Lilianne Fan. Each of the speaker will be given 20 to 25 minutes to convey their views. I will send you a reminder if you have only 2 minutes to wrap up. For the first speaker, I would like to invite Her Excellency Kheng Samvada, and I would like to read her short biography. Her Excellency Kheng Samvada's career span across international multilateral institutions and government on women's and children's issues. She has served as the Permanent Secretary of State of the Ministry of Women Affairs in Cambodia since 2018, or Secretary of State from 2008 to 2017. She leads the implementation of the National Public Financial Management reform in her ministry toward integrating gender in the national budget formulation process. She has been active in supporting women empowerment and addressing gender-based violence and gender mainstreaming in 3 ASEAN pillars. She led an ASEAN women group for the development of the regional plan of action on women, peace, and security to be adopted by the ASEAN leaders by ASEAN Leaders Summit in 2022 under the chairship of Cambodia. She speaks Khmer, French, and English. She obtained her master's degree of economics and social management from Paris 8 University, France. Her Excellency, the screen is yours for 20 to 25 minutes, please.
Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished guest participants, ladies and gentlemen. A very good afternoon from Cambodia. Share screen. On behalf of the Ministry of Women's Affairs, I'm very pleased to participate in the 5th session of the ASEAN-IPR Discussion Series 2021 on the theme Cross-sectoral Initiative to Advance the Women, Peace and Security Agenda in ASEAN. As we know, on 31st October 2000, next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah. On 31st October 2000, the United Nations Security Council adopted the Resolution 1325. The resolution acknowledges the importance of women's participation at all levels of decision-making on peace and security, and the inclusion of gender perspectives in peace negotiation, peacekeeping operations, post-conflict peace building, and governance. In peacekeeping mission, women's participation can make peacekeeping more caring and empathetic, and can serve as role models for women and girls in the host community. UNSCR 1325 has 4 pillars, namely participation, protection, prevention, relief, and recovery. It calls for increased participation of women at all levels of decision-making in national, regional, and international institutions, in mechanism for the prevention, management, and resolution of conflicts, in peace negotiation and peace operations as soldiers, police, and civilians. It calls for the protection of women and girls from sexual and gender-based violence, including in emergency and humanitarian situations, such as in refugee camps. It calls for improving intervention strategies in the prevention of violence against women, strengthening women's rights under national law, and supporting local women's peace initiatives and conflict resolution processes. It also calls for the advancement of relief and recovery measures by considering the needs of women and girls in the design of refugee camps and settlements. Next slide, please. ASEAN key milestone related to the Women, Peace, Security agenda include the following. The 2017 joint statement on promoting women, peace, and security in ASEAN, adopted during the 31st summit. The establishment of the ASEAN Women for Peace Registry in 2018. The 2019 joint statement on promoting the Women, Peace, and Security agenda at the ASEAN Regional Forum in Bangkok. In 2019 also, the ASEAN First Regional Symposium on implementing Women, Peace, and Security agenda was held in Phnom Penh, Cambodia. One of the symposium's recommendations was to develop the regional study on women, peace, security in ASEAN. In 2020, we had the ASEAN leaders special session at the 46th Summit on Women's Empowerment in the Digital Age. In the same year, we have also the ASEAN Ministerial Dialogue on strengthening women's role for sustainable peace and security. In November also, in November 2020, we have another important event, which is the ASEAN Women Leaders Summit on women's role in building a cohesive, dynamic, sustainable, and inclusive ASEAN community in a post-COVID-19 world. The ASEAN Regional Study on Women, Peace, and Security was launched on the International Women's Day, 8 March 2021. Next slide, please. ASEAN has also some outcome document which are in line with the 4 pillars of the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325. These include the ASEAN Regional Plan of Action on the Elimination of Violence Against Women, the ASEAN Declaration on the Gender Responsive Implementation of the ASEAN Community Vision 2025 and Sustainable Development Goals, the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework 2020, which is the consolidated exit strategy from the COVID-19. The ASEAN Gender Outlook, achieving the SDG for all and leaving no woman or girl behind. The ASEAN Regional Study on Women, Peace and Security. The ASEAN UNESCAP report on addressing unpaid care work in ASEAN. The regional report on the midterm review of the ASEAN Regional Plan of Action on the Elimination of Violence Against Women, and the forthcoming ASEAN Gender Mainstreaming Strategic Framework 2021-2025. We also have some ASEAN upcoming documents related to the 4 pillars of 1325. These include, next slide. Oh no, not yet. These include the ASEAN Regional Framework and Guidance on Protection, Gender and Inclusion in Disaster Management, the Assessment Report on State of Gender Equality and Climate Change in ASEAN, the ASEAN Regional Plan of Action on Women, Peace and Security, and the ASEAN Master Plan on Women's Development. Next slide, please. The ASEAN Committee on Women have initiatives which are in line with the 4 pillars of the Women, Peace and Security agenda. These initiatives are the 7 priority areas of our new ACW work plan from 2021 to 2025. These priorities are namely gender data and statistics, gender mainstreaming, gender responsive climate and disaster resilience, gender approach to enhancing safety and protection of women and girls, women, peace and security, women's economic empowerment and future of work, and gender responsive governance and leadership. Next slide, please. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. One of the key recommendations of the Phnom Penh Symposium on Women, Peace and Security was the development of the ASEAN Regional Study. The study was drafted by consultants and an advisory group composed of Cambodia and Vietnam focal points of ACW, representative of women's rights from Indonesia, Malaysia, and Philippines, of the ASEAN Commission on the Promotion and Protection on the Rights of Women and Children, with technical support and assistance from the ASEAN Secretariat, the ASEAN USAID Prospect, and UN Women. The study took stock of progress made in the advancement of the WPS agenda in the ASEAN member states, as well as the gaps and needs for responding to existing and emerging challenges related to sustainable peace and security in the region. Key recommendations follow-up of the regional study on women, peace, security include to develop an ASEAN Regional Plan of Action on Women, Peace and Security, to mainstream gender across the 3 ASEAN community pillars and sectoral bodies, to ensure that the ASEAN approach to peace and security is for all, to build the institutional capacity and commitment to women, peace and security through knowledge building exercise, regional dialogue, and international engagement among relevant sectoral bodies. Last but not least is to raise awareness of the ASEAN approach to women, peace, security among people and civil society. For the moment, we have a concept note related to the development of the Regional Plan of Action on women, peace and security, the concept note is being circulated to all ACW focal points for input. The regional plan of action on women, peace and security will be a one-year project starting from September this year until October 2022 next year. Like the regional study on women, peace and security, the development of the regional plan of action on WPS will also be supported by the ASEAN Secretariat, the ASEAN USAID Prospect, and UN Women. It will be co-chaired by ACW Cambodia and ACW Indonesia. What is important is the engagement with key relevant sectoral bodies across the three ASEAN community pillars in the process of the development of this regional plan of action on WPS. This is very critical for ownership and implementation of the regional plan of action. So the development and implementation structure will be composed of members from the ASEAN Committee on Women, members of the ASEAN Commission on the Promotion and Protection of the Rights of Women and Children, members from the ASEAN Economic Community and the ASEAN Political Security Community. Therefore, the advisory group from the regional study will be expanded from ACW focal points of Cambodia, Vietnam, Indonesia, and ACWC representatives on women's rights from Indonesia, Malaysia, and Philippines to include the chair of the working group on counterterrorism, director of the ASEAN Institute for Peace and Reconciliation, who will coordinate with the members of the ASEAN Women Peace Registry, the chair of the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights, or AICHR, the co-chairs of the ASEAN Committee on Disaster Management's Working Group on Protection, Gender and Inclusion, and the chair of AWEN, or ASEAN Women Entrepreneurs Network. Especially ASEAN-IPR will play a critical role in building capacity of ASEAN member states in raising awareness about the importance of developing the regional plan of action on women, peace, and security. Barriers to the implementation. Next slide, please. Barriers to the implementation of the regional plan of action would be that ASEAN member states have too many national priorities during the recovery period from COVID-19. So strategies to address these challenges would be to develop the regional plan of action through desk review using national or regional studies on WPS or reports related to the implementation of the 4 pillars of UNSCR 1325. The development of the regional plan of action should address existing challenges on women, peace, security, and should develop activities through discussion with all relevant stakeholders, taking into consideration the local and regional contexts. The draft RPA WPS will be consulted with all relevant ASEAN sectoral bodies in the 3 ASEAN pillars. Will be consulted with ASEAN dialogue partners, ASEAN development partners, international organizations, civil society organization, and other stakeholders, because we would like to have a comprehensive regional plan of action on WPS. So how can ACW advocate with ASEAN member states so that they will incorporate the Women, Peace, Security agenda as part of their national policy action plan? I think we can do this through 2 strategies. The first one is to build capacity and increase their awareness on the 4 pillars of the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325. The second strategy is to encourage ASEAN member states to fund the harmonization of their national policies action plans with the 4 pillars of UNSCR 1325. For example, Cambodia does not have a national action plan on women, peace, and security. But the royal government of Cambodia is committed to implement the UNSCR 1325. The following are Cambodia policies and strategies which are in line with the 4 pillars of UNSCR 1325, such as the 5-year strategic plan of the Ministry of Women's Affairs, focusing on key strategic areas to empower women in the economy, health, education for social behavior change, to combat gender-based violence, trafficking, and sexual exploitation of women, to promote women in decision-making at all levels, and to mainstream gender in policies, plans, sectoral programs, and key national reform programs. We have 3 national action plans to prevent violence against women. The first one was from 2011 to 2015, and the current one, or the third one, is from 2019 to 2023. We have 2 national action plans to combat trafficking of women and children. We also have the policy on promotion of gender equality for subnational democratic development, and we have gender mainstreaming in the national mind action strategies. So in relation to the 4 pillars of UNSCR 1325, Cambodia achievements related to women's participation include an increased number of women in decision in leadership position. Women represent 21% of members in the National Assembly and 16% of senators. We have 1 woman as Deputy Prime Minister and 5 women head of national institutions, including 3 women as ministers, 1 woman as the national auditor, and 1 woman as president of the Cambodian Red Cross. In all ministries, we have at least 1 woman as Secretary of State and 1 woman as Under Secretary of State. We have 2 women as governors of provinces and 7 women as governors of districts. Women vice governors exist in all provinces and all districts. Sub-Decree 22 requires that at least 1 among the 3 village leaders must be a woman. Women represent 41% in the civil service and 25% as deputy chief of offices and upper levels. Cambodia is ranked 2nd among ASEAN countries in dispatching women to UN peacekeeping operations, and 17 among 120 countries on women's participation in UN peacekeeping missions. Next slide, please. In line with the prevention pillar of UNSCR 1325, Cambodia has made significant progress in its efforts to prevent and respond to violence against women through the implementation of its 3 national action plans to prevent violence against women, starting from 2011 to 2023, involving 16 line ministries, 4 development partners, and 30 NGOs. The National Action Plan focuses on prevention, legal protection, and multi-sectoral services, laws and policies, and monitoring and evaluation. Legal services are provided with free of charge lawyers for the poor women victims of gender-based violence. In addition, the Ministry of Women's Affairs has been intensively carrying out national campaigns for public awareness and mobilization of men and boys to stop violence against women, including the Good Men campaign and the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. We have quarterly meeting of the working groups on gender-based violence at national and subnational levels, with the participation of relevant ministries, departments, development partners, international and local NGOs. We have multi-sectoral networks at provincial levels, bringing relevant stakeholders such as police, healthcare providers, local authorities, legal and social service providers, and NGOs together to address the gaps in providing services to victims of violence against women. Since the pandemic, we use online meetings for our working group on violence against women, and we use digital platforms to disseminate COVID-19 and gender-based violence prevention messages to women and the public. The staff of the Ministry of Women's Affairs use their mobile phones to continue the online counseling and referral with the victims of gender-based violence. The protection pillar of UN Security Council Resolution 1325 has been implemented for 10 years in Cambodia through our Safe Village and Commune policy, which includes criteria on no human trafficking and domestic violence, responding timely to disasters, and all communicable disease and pandemics. In every commune, we have a woman responsible for women's and children's matters. She intervenes for not severe case of domestic violence, or she cooperates with the staff of the Provincial Department of Women's Affairs to help the woman in need of legal, medical, and mental assistance. For the implementation of the relief and recovery pillar of UNSCR 1325, the Royal Government of Cambodia, with assistance from development partners, has scaled up the social protection program by putting in place the cash transfer program for the poor and vulnerable households affected by COVID-19, including poor women head of household. This cash transfer program is delivered in parallel to the existing cash transfer program for the poor pregnant women and children from 0 to 2 years old to ensure that all children are vaccinated properly and pregnant women get prenatal consultation properly. Last but not least, Cambodia's advocacy for women, peace, and security includes 2 important events. The first one is the 2019 regional one is the first ever Asia-Europe meeting forum on women, peace, and security held last week from 13 to 14 October 2021, showcasing women from Asia and Europe in peacekeeping, combating gender-based violence, and assessing the implementation of UNSCR 1325 during these 21 years of implementation since its adoption in 2000. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Her Excellency. You have spent 22 minutes. Thank you for respecting the time. And thank you for giving us a very comprehensive presentation on the achievement, also barriers and strategies to address the barriers, as well as the example from Cambodia in implementing its commitment to implement the UN Resolution 1325. It's really warmed my heart listening to your presentation and how far ASEAN has been done under your leadership on the women, peace, and security. And thank you so much for this. Our second speaker is Dr. Gloria Jumamil Mercado. She received her doctorate degree at the National Sun Yat-sen University in Taiwan, majoring in mainland China studies, graduating as summa cum laude. Her MA thesis, entitled Integrated Development for Mindanao, Its Implication to National Security, has been used as a technical paper which helped in the forging of the 1996 final peace agreement between the government of the Republic of Philippines and the Moro National Liberation Front. She has been working for government for over 40 years, holding various positions, including representation to international bodies, most notably as one of the permanent representatives to the Philippines to the ASEAN Women Peace Registry. She is the first female Commodore in the Philippines Navy Reserve Forces and is the current commander of the Naval Forces Reserve Eastern Visayas. She was the chairperson of the government implementing panel of the GPH MILF Peace Accord and was charged with the implementation of the normalization phase of the said agreement. Currently, she is a senior lecturer at the Ateneo de Manila University on modern Chinese economy. Dr. Jumamil Mercado, you have 20 to 25 minutes to convey your messages. Thank you.
It's gonna be shorter. Thank you, Your Excellency Wahyuningrum, Ambassador Wisaka Puja, and my fellow panel member, His Excellency Samvada. First, please allow me to thank the ASEAN Institute for Peace and Reconciliation, together with the Embassy of Finland and the Embassy of Ireland in Jakarta, for inviting us to talk about the ASEAN Women Peace Registry. So the focus of my talk would be OPR, but a little segue on some realities of the Philippines. Our session today provides a platform for discussion on the current state of WPS agenda in the Southeast Asian region. This is also a timely topic as we continue to grapple with the long-term effect of the global pandemic and conflicts, especially to women and children. I would like to highlight in this talk what women organizations can do, such as the OPR, in these difficult times, touching on the global perspective of the WPS and the lens in the ASEAN. I would likewise briefly talk about how WPS agenda expand and go beyond the traditional security by looking into issues like extremism, climate change, global health, and some others. Let me start by asking this relevant question today. How do we make women, peace, and security relevant to the current pandemic and the imperatives of crisis leadership? These thoughts have been haunting as I think of the compelling challenges for women amidst the alarming increase of COVID-19 in our respective countries, the ASEAN, and the consequent challenges. Indeed, it is a difficult time for ASEAN. With all the recent challenges the region has been facing, from battling with global health crisis to the internal conflicts among ASEAN member states, from economic instability to geopolitical and territorial disputes, ASEAN, now more than ever, should rise above all these difficulties through cooperation among the member states and other allied countries, as the world continues to exhaust all resources in mitigating the spread of the COVID-19. Southeast Asia is being confronted with problems such as unemployment, economic instability, access to public health systems that have escalated due to the global pandemics. And in all of this, least we forget that women are left vulnerable. In the ASEAN region, we made significant progress when all the member states have ratified the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women. ASEAN already has a strong commitment towards the women peace security agenda as outlined in the joint Manila Statement in 2017 on promoting WPS in the region. However, in 2016 data from UN Women, only the Philippines and Indonesia have formalized the National Action Plan in the ASEAN region, while Malaysia and Vietnam are in the offing. Within the Asia-Pacific region, countries like Afghanistan, Australia, Japan, Republic of Korea, Nepal, and New Zealand likewise developed its NAP, with Timor-Leste signifying the crafting on the same action plan. Different political climate among the member states makes it more challenging for the ASEAN to adopt the UN Security Council Resolution 1325. These current realities emphasizes the need for NAP-WPS or an alternative but affirmative action document that is not NAP-WPS, but similar. The ASEAN as a regional body has existing mechanism that member states can collectively work together in promoting women, peace, and security. The ASEAN Way views the member nation's sovereignty as absolute and holds a core value of non-interference while building consensus decision-making without really interfering in each other's domestic affairs. At present, the ASEAN Way has become an institutional brand of the organization alongside with the ASEAN identity and the ASEAN true community. In December 2018, women from different sectors across Southeast Asia gathered in Cebu City, Philippines, for the inaugural establishment of the ASEAN Women for Peace Registry, or AWPR. It is a regional organization in response to UNSCR 1325, as translated in the 2017 Manila Declaration for WPS. I am very much honored to be among the first 22 ASEAN women representing the Philippines, together with former presidential advisor for the peace process, Secretary Teresita Quintos Deles, and the Philippine Center for Islam and Democracy, President Amina Rasul Bernardo. This pool of experts comprised of women peace advocates, recognized for our extensive experience in peace building, mediation, and reconciliation efforts, is an offshoot of a prior initiative in relation to the operationalization of the joint statement and promoting WPS in ASEAN, which was adopted in the 31st ASEAN Summit last November 2017. The registry will be part of the resources of the ASEAN-IPR, Institute for Peace and Reconciliation. Since the establishment of AWPR in 2018, it started gaining momentum when it was followed by a series of trainings on mainstreaming peace and reconciliation on February 2019 in Manila, and eventually the first meeting of AWPR and the regional symposium on implementing WPS agenda in ASEAN on August 2019 in Phnom Penh, Cambodia. I consider this as a significant milestone of AWPR since this elevated the need to draft WPS within the region. This is where the role of Women Peace Registry is most needed. With a network of ASEAN women with key positions in government, in society, sharing of best practices will take significant steps in formulating the National Action Plan. NAPs are important as these would serve as blueprints of the national development strategies on women, peace, and security. With the NAPs, international development partners meaningfully align their plans and strategies to the national government's priority development agenda. In all the conversations of AWPR, women, we realize that NAP-WPS may not be the only mechanism to implement the UNSCR 1325. We need to embrace the diversity as well as the specific reality of our member states. The pandemic has changed how we see the world and even how we address the existing global issues. It has restricted us from traveling and conducting seminars, and AWPR is not spared from this global crisis. Despite all of this, in May 2020, I felt that there was a need to keep the network strong and collectively respond to the call of the times. I volunteered to reignite the network by updating our database and strategizing how to move the organization forward given a complete representation from the 10 member states. The following month, we successfully met via video conference to re-establish acquaintances among members of OPAR and agreed to do initiative that would give life to the ASEAN Leaders 2017 Joint Statement, and even discuss the future of OPAR amidst the global pandemic. After the virtual meeting last June 2020, various organizations from member states organized series of webinars, such as, but not limited to, the role of women negotiators and mediators, and the maintenance of regional peace and security, women, peace and security, and COVID-19 in the ASEAN, conflict resolution and peace building in Southeast Asia, the contemporary challenges in countering radicalization and violent extremism, the global agenda on US SCR 1325, and the relevance of an armed civilian protection in advancing women, peace, and security in the region, empowering women and youth in building sustainable peace, enhancing the role of ASEAN women in sustainable peace and security, and many others. All these were done during this pandemic. Though the ASEAN-IPR discussion, through this ASEAN-IPR discussion series, where the members of OPAR actively take part as resource person, allowed us also to build on our expertise to assist the other member states in formulating the respective WPS. I am confident that all these initiatives will contribute in the integration of essential pillars of the WPS and the peace and the agenda, which include women's participation, which was discussed earlier by my fellow panel member, incorporation of gender perspective into conflict prevention initiative, protection of the rights of women and girls, and lastly, ensuring that gender considerations are integrated into relief and recovery efforts. In the Philippines, the women representation and involvement in national development, as well as national security, are reflected in the past legislations and implemented policy frameworks over the years. Foremost is the 1987 Philippine Constitution, which guarantees women and men fundamental equality before the law. These laws, policies, institutions show that the Philippines puts high regards and premium on women, and that the country has achieved substantial gains in terms of recognizing, protecting, fulfilling, and promoting the rights of Filipino women. We are very proud that the Philippines became the first country in Asia to develop a national action plan to implement UNSCR 1321 on WPS. This is to ensure women's participation in peace processes and empower them to take on expanded roles in conflict situations. Launched in 2010, the NAP is a guideline for the agencies to promote women's rights in periods of conflict and post-conflict situation, as well as promoting women's active participation and decisive role in peace and security processes and mechanism. As former national focal of the Women, Peace and Security, I am hopeful that as we enrich the third generation WPS, we can hurdle the structural rigidities that adversely affects the institutionalization at agency and ground level of WPS. We must break the perception that WPS is a platform only in the defense sector, but instead could be mainstream with the implementation of the robust gender and development program by promoting as well the understanding of security sector development, which could be whole of nation. We need champions, especially in the government, and especially we need champions as enabler officials. My firsthand experience with how other countries push for the inclusion of women in national development and security have greatly inspired me to establish a network of women in 2008, the Women in National Development and Security, or WINS, which extends the work of Women Waging Peace Network to the Philippines and connect women peacemakers from conflict areas around the world with each other and with policy shapers. It is an advocacy and support group for the security sector, and we succeeded to put women in key positions in the armed forces. We continue to lobby for women's participation in local and international conferences, especially in security studies, such as the Institute for Inclusive Security for Women in Security at John F. Kennedy School of Government, Harvard University, transnational security cooperation and advanced security cooperation in the Asia-Pacific Center for Security Studies in Hawaii as Women Peace and Security Fellows. In our own country initiatives, we made sure that our efforts in mainstreaming women in various mechanisms are aligned to the general objectives of AWPR as a regional organization. In 2018, we gathered more than 100 women leaders across Mindanao. The Women Leaders Peace Forum. It highlighted the importance of recognizing women leaders in addressing key issues in the island. The participants come from national line agencies, local government units, civil society organization, public safety and security officer, private sector, youth groups, Muslims, and tribal indigenous people. Meaningful participation of women in Bangsamoro spells a difference as they collectively build on a shared future for the people in Bangsamoro region. As we implement the normalization process, I led ocular visits and consultations in the 6 government-acknowledged Moro Islamic Liberation Front camps and listened to the voices of the communities, especially the women belonging to the Bangsamoro Islamic Women Auxiliary Brigade, who wanted to be reintegrated to the police and security force after the decommissioning process. We continue to engage and partner with Bangsamoro women leaders, especially in terms of gender equality and peace building, enhancing the capabilities of women in conflict resolution processes, as well as knowledge sharing of strategies to prevent and counter violent extremism in this part of the country. Our future programs with the Bangsamoro would endeavor to mainstream the transitional justice and reconciliation as a key component of the peace process and the normalization. During the Marawi siege, the need for women participation became compelling as the internally displaced people increased in different evacuation centers. One response was the creation of hijab troopers, a composite of military and police women soldiers who were deployed to the evacuation and resettlement centers. They were effective support group for psychosocial needs of the IDPs. The Office of the Presidential Advisor for the Peace Process assisted in training these hijab troopers with conflict sensitivities and peace-promoting programs. We hope this group will be institutionalized to respond not only to conflict, but other emergencies as well. Several studies have been conducted and articles published proving that women leaders' strategic response to the pandemic had so far been effective on mitigating the impact of global health crisis. Data has shown that women only make up less than 7% of the world leaders, but female leaders around the globe, such as Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen, New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, the German Chancellor Angela Merkel, Denmark Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen, and Sanna Marin, the Finnish Prime Minister, have been globally recognized for the commendable pandemic leadership characterized by early action with scientific intervention had significantly contained the COVID-19. Their strategic response had gained public trust, contributing to the overall leadership effectiveness. In the Philippines, We also have our own leaders in the forefront of health emergencies. Women actively rationalizing the COVID response from the bureaucracy, especially the Department of Health, policymakers in the House of Representatives, local government units, frontliners, and service sectors are all doing their share. Noteworthy also is the leadership of women across the sectors who lead pandemic response through community partnership and grassroots approach. The programs reach communities where there are greater needs and engage vulnerable sectors such as women and the front lines and marginalized sectors such as urban poor, farmers, and fisher folk. As women who hold positions that affect the policies of our respective governments, the more there is a need to push for policies that protect women's access to economic activities, education, social welfare, and health. The world is changing. So should the way we look at WPS or UN Security Council 1325. This is not only about women's participation in the aforementioned pillars of WPS, but to ensure that women will be given the opportunity to lead in times of this global health crisis. Given the special cases in some areas in the region, I argue that perhaps it's about time that we think beyond NAP-WPS or the National Action Plan on Women, Peace, Security, and be more proactive in pushing for meaningful participation of women in national development. Yes, it is important for NAPs to be crafted and implemented, but the most essential thing is meaningful participation of women should be felt in the ground. We will continue to develop mentoring sessions with other ASEAN countries and hopefully expand it in the Asia Pacific with the help of other counterparts like Australia and Japan. As UNSC resolution turned 20 last year, it is about time for us to review and examine how far we have come, continue the best practices, and further provide recommendation as to our future programs and projects. I also strongly suggest including in the future NAP-WPS strong mechanism to monitor and evaluate WPS programs and projects. Over the years, while women in peace process have relatively come a long way, much can still be done and should be done as we transcend the traditional political and socio-cultural boundaries. We also need to continue creating spaces where our narratives can be heard. It is important to document research and translate best practices and challenges as vital discourses in WPS conversations. As we recognize that the issues and challenges we face continue to evolve beyond traditional security, it is important that we continue to be open-minded, creative, and critical in thinking of ways in addressing and looking for collaboration platforms that we can work together. The challenge of women, peace, and security is how to remain or even more relevant in this time. When leadership is being tested by the pandemic, more than anything else, beyond our positions in government, beyond our positions in the academe and military, business sector, or civil society organization, lest we forget that we are women. We are mothers, sisters, and daughters. So amidst these uncertainties, we women with brave hearts can always be hopeful and be more. Women indeed continue to play a vital role in different segments of the peace processes, either as policy movers, peace enablers, catalysts of transformation, and meaningful representation and proactive advocates. By virtue of women being women, we are innately capable of understanding the plight of women, moving forward, and the need to address WPS issues and concern While women have susceptibility in times of conflict, they also have the power to be resilient and become agents of change. Together, let us contribute to be the drivers of transformation. On a final note, let me just say once again that what keeps us WPS advocates going is our stubborn belief that there are no structural or legal impediments to women inclusion. And inclusion should always be meaningful inclusion. With that, I'd like to say thank you and good afternoon.
Thank you so much. It's very fruitful and meaningful presentation. Among many things that you've mentioned, I actually I take a note on very important thing for me, that WPS should not only be used in conflict, but also to be mainstreamed in women and development program. I think that's also introduction of a new paradigm on looking at WPS in development program and policies. And just for your information, the NPA of Philippines had been used by us in Indonesia as the example. We continue to refer to the NPA of Philippines on the UN Resolution 1325. And I also like the suggestion that you've said earlier on spaces where our narratives can be heard. And I think that would link to the existing activity in the Philippines, especially in Mindanao, on Mindanao Women Leaders Peace Forum. So perhaps this is something that we can upgrade it at the ASEAN level. So ASEAN Women Leader Peace Forum, because I saw similar initiative in Indonesia, in Cambodia, and many part of member states in ASEAN. So why not making it as a regional wide women peace leader peace forum, and it is the space in which our narrative as women working in conflict and peace can be heard and can be documented, can be translated into a number of documents. All right, thank you very much. And our third speaker is another important person in the region. Lilianne is the International Director and co-founder of Guntanyo Foundation, a regional humanitarian organization based in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and Aceh, Indonesia, and chair of the Asia Pacific Refugee Rights Network's Rohingya Working Group. She is also the head of the Secretariat of for the All-Party Parliamentary Group Malaysia and on refugee policy. She is a cultural anthropologist and humanitarian professional for more than 20 years of experience working with refugees, internally displaced persons, and communities affected by conflict and disaster, including in Aceh, Myanmar, Haiti, and with Syrian refugees in Jordan. Currently specialized on the situation of the stateless Rohingya in Rakhine State and in ASEAN. Lilianne is also regularly provide expertise to a range of institutions of government, including the UN, the World Bank, ASEAN, Government of Malaysia, and also the Government of between 2005 to 2012, Lilianne served in several large-scale post-crisis recovery missions, including with the UN-led humanitarian responses in post-earthquake Haiti, also functioned as advisor to the ASEAN Special Envoy to the post-Nargis recovery in Myanmar, member of the advisory team of Governor of Aceh on Sustainable Development for the Aceh Agreement 2005, Senior Policy Coordinator for Oxfam International in Aceh and NIAS from 2005 to 2008. She holds an MA in Anthropology from Columbia University in New York. Lilianne, you have 20 to 25 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Excellency Yuyun. I'm really honored to be part of this conversation today, and I'm very honored to be able to be part of this discussion with so many esteemed wonderful experienced speakers and women who've really been trailblazers in who work in the region on getting the women peace and security agenda much more formalized, legitimized, and activated in ASEAN. I'd like to talk today here as a member of the Southeast Asia Network on Women Peace Negotiators and Mediators, which was established last year, about almost 1 year ago, under the auspices and leadership of Her Excellency Ibu Retno Marsudi, who is the Foreign Minister of Indonesia, and with the support of many of the ASEAN member states. So just to give a little bit of background of the mandate of this Southeast Asian Network of Women Peace Negotiators and Mediators, we were set up really as a network of experts. So it's not really a network which has necessarily representatives of every single ASEAN country, but it's a network that brings together a group of women who are very experienced in different peace mediation and negotiation processes, and also have worked on peace building in many different contexts. So the mandate of this network is to actively contribute to resolving conflicts in the region by having a platform of women with experience in mediation, negotiation, and facilitation of peace processes, to actively contribute in achieving and sustaining peace in Southeast Asia and beyond, to step into leadership role of resolution of conflicts by adding different levels of support, including analysis, policy advice to foreign ministries, to build confidence in mediation by learning from one another in track 1, track 2, track 1.5 settings, and to ascend to the challenge of the dynamics of conflict mediation, which has, as we know, been predominantly led by patriarchal frameworks. So it's also a transformative agenda to change the entire framework of conflict resolution. To enable consolidation of the sharing of experiences, increase of knowledge and know-how among members, as well as with other women in Southeast Asia, including all of you who are here with us today, interested in advancing conflict resolution in different contexts. To develop capacities and the profile of members, as well as other women in Southeast Asia who are interested in conflict resolution, through specific and tailor-made interventions to be accepted as advisors in mediation processes as well. This is all being done in a way that complements existing initiatives in ASEAN and in the region, and really builds on the many wonderful initiatives that have already been established, including the ones that we've heard of so far today, in a way that seeks to advance the inclusion and meaningful participation of women at all phases of peace process as mediators and negotiators, to exchange and enhance collaboration with similar networks from other regions as well, and at the global level on issues relevant to conflict mediation, peace building, and negotiations, and to partner with other like-minded organizations. So we have currently in the steering committee of this network, we have some members who are very experienced in peace processes. So, for example, one of our members is Professor Miriam Coronel, who is, of course, also one of the chief negotiators from the Philippines government side in the Bangsamoro peace agreement. Of course, a colleague as well of Dr. Gloria. And we have also Ms. Emma Leslie. Mrs. Emma Leslie is the director of the Center for Peace and Conflict Resolution based in Cambodia. We have Mrs. Shadia Marhaban, who is, I think, very well known as well in this region as being the only woman from the Free Aceh movement who was involved in the negotiation. So the perspective also from a non-state armed actor. and the importance of including women in those among those stakeholders as well. Myself, who has a focus much more on looking at peace building and from the humanitarian perspective as well, and also looking at the potential of refugees as peace builders. And this is, some of the advice and work that we're bringing to the network as well, looking at how to empower refugee peace builders and ensure that they are included in discussions on peace in their homelands, which are still in conflict. We have Ms. Tekla, who's from East Timor as well, and she's been very, very instrumental in looking at peace building and empowerment of women, particularly IDP women in situations of displacement in Timor-Leste. So it's a very dynamic network, and we have already conducted quite a few activities, including a massive training that was held again under the leadership of the government of Indonesia, under the leadership of Her Excellency Ibu Retno, and that was done in June. A few days of capacity building for women in the region, and really sort of in-depth trainings on looking at the different levels of, the difficulty and the dynamics of negotiation processes, the kind of role of the mediator, the different roles that the mediator has, the challenges that are particularly faced by women trying to get into that space of mediation, but also looking at transforming the entire the dynamics of the peace process, and who should be around the table, whose voices need to be listened to. These are all very important. We had a session that I led, which was looking at the humanitarian impacts of conflict, and we also had a refugee speaker who I facilitated to join the training, who gave a very good presentation on why it's important to basically include refugees in the discussion on peace as well, because they really know the dynamics, and particularly refugee women who have been so, impacted in multiple ways by conflict and by displacement, and why they are really the key actors in terms of rebuilding their societies, and why we need to take them seriously. So some of the conflicts that we're actually actively involved in already, these include Myanmar, southern Thailand, Philippines, and even beyond our Southeast Asia region, Afghanistan. We've also been talking to women in the Middle East, and even women in Africa. So the Cameroon situation, for example, we have been networking and connecting there also to learn lessons from women who have been part of those peace processes. And we'd really like to be able to engage much more in providing direct policy advice to governments in the region. So for example, now on the situation in Myanmar, we have been advising Her Excellency Ibu Retno. I myself have also been advising the Foreign Minister of Malaysia. And in all of these approaches, we are trying very much to put the perspectives of women and the importance of including women in dialogues very much at the center of that. But our advice also goes beyond, really just a perspective on women. It's also looking at the overall perspective on conflict and advice to the foreign ministries about steps that can be taken to advance conflict resolution in these countries. We also have, we're a member of the Global Alliance, which is a global coalition of organizations, and it's a big network that is really working on advancing the WPS agenda as well. And just next week, in fact, 27th of October, there will be an annual public outreach event, which will be held by the Global Alliance that we will be participating in as well. There is also an upcoming capacity building of Timorese diplomats, which is going to be taking place quite soon. And we will very much be involved in that also. So this is also to say that basically, I think that we see ourselves very much as not just being aligned to the ASEAN priorities on women, peace, and security, but actually being a manifestation of that. And everything that we do, we do hope that the ASEAN member states and the different networks within the ASEAN region will really work together to advance this, and we're very happy to be part of that landscape to take this agenda forward. We do think that there are some very critical issues that are on the table now that face our region. Obviously, Myanmar is one of the most critical ones. Related to that, the issue of the Rohingya, in particular, as a displaced population and a stateless population that has been really displaced and affected and dispossessed in the region for a very long time, even before the Myanmar coup, and is one of the most persecuted groups in the entire world, and is currently basically one of the largest refugee populations, which is really right on our doorstep, with currently the largest refugee camp in the world being in Bangladesh, in Kutupalong, which is literally at the doorstep of ASEAN and originates from an ASEAN country. So we do feel that ASEAN has a particular responsibility to pay attention to this issue, and looking at the impact of the years of displacement and persecution and conflict that that Rohingya women have suffered under, and trying to ensure that there are ways of having the voices and experiences of these women actually reflected in discussions that are taking place at the regional level and in regional policy discussions. So this is definitely one of the agendas that we have to advance. Obviously, the situation in Afghanistan as well, not directly in our region, but Afghan women are very much part of the network that we are engaging. And there's a very big role that ASEAN countries have to play in this as well. Already, the government of Indonesia, was quite engaged in looking at trying to support the dialogue. In fact, the peace negotiations between civilians and the Taliban. All of that's really collapsed right now, but there's a real need to get back to a table for negotiation to also hold the Taliban accountable, and particularly accountable to their actions towards women and their behavior towards women. So these are all agendas which we would be very much wanting to advance in our engagements. And we really do look forward to working with all of the relevant stakeholders, with the ASEAN Institute for Peace and Reconciliation, with the other networks in the region, and of course with the governments of our region as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lilianne. It's very, very rich and comprehensive explanation about the work and activities of the Southeast Asian Network of Women, Peace Negotiators and Mediators. I participated in one of the training. I can testify that there has been a lot of experiences and expertise shared by the members of the network. And also Lilianne mentioned about capacity building activities, exchange and collaboration, network, reaching out to even going to the South Asia and Africa, and now becoming part of the Global Alliance of Regional Women Mediators Network. If WPS is a mosaic, so we are now having regional intervention from the ASEAN side, and also we have national initiative as presented by Dr. Jumamil Mercado. And then here we also have a regional network that has been contributing to the idea of bringing the framework of WPS, including participation, protection, prevention, relief, and recovery into the picture. Now, we have about 55 minutes for question and answer before we end the session. So let's use this opportunity to ask our experts a number of questions. I myself have a lot of questions, but let's prioritize our audience. The first question coming from Amina Rasul Bernardo. The question is in the chat box, and let me read this. 20 years after UNCSR 1325, ASEAN member states have improved implementation of their commitment to WPS at the policy level. How can we improve implementation of actual program that reach community levels? We have also another question from Harry. what kind of policy and activities should be prioritizing with regard to the UN-CSR 1325 in our regional engagement with the G20 engagement groups in Indonesia and Southeast Asia region for next year? Oh yeah, Indonesia will be the president of G20 next year. So one question on how to make the implementation of UN's resolution 1325 effective at the community level, and the other one, how to make it effective, and what kind of priorities to be placed at the regional engagement and the engagement with G20. Similar question. Can I ask panelist speakers to ask these two related questions, please? Who would like to answer the question first?
I will not answer Amina's question because we're partners and we both know what's our realities on the ground. Probably interesting to hear it from His Excellency Samvada.
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you for the question. I will try to answer from Cambodia perspective. So the question is that how can we improve implementation of actual program that reach community levels? As I already told you some in my presentation, we have mechanism for gender equality at national and local levels because our government see the importance of this grassroots level, which is very close to the community. So at that level, we have women responsible for women and children matters. In all communes, we have a woman responsible for women and children matters, but she works with all relevant stakeholders in solving, for example, the issue of gender-based violence, so that people, we want to have a zero gender-based violence. And this should be start from the family. And this is that to tell you that we want to improve the situation of gender-based violence. And for the moment, we can say that we are quite proud about our progress, because we conduct with development partners 2 studies. The first study is 5 years ago. We see that people think that domestic violence should be personal matters. But now we have a study, and the people say that domestic violence should not be personal affairs, but this is a crime that can be punished. So there's a chain of behavior, a chain of thinking. However, we still have challenges. And these challenges is related to human resources and budget constraint. Why human resources? Although we have established this mechanism in every commune, but we think that we need to build their capacity so that they can improve their work, to work for women, peace and security at the lower level. So we need to build their capacity. About budget constraint, the government has provided budget to these women, but the budget is given according to the development of the economy of the country. So because of COVID-19, so this impact has, this COVID-19, this pandemic has impact on the work for gender equality. And however, we still advance in this because we are implementing what we call decentralization reform. In the decentralization reform, the government gave more and more powers to the grassroots levels. So this is what I can answer your question related to how we improve implementation of actual programs that reach community level. So if you want more clarification, please. Thank you.
If I may add, I think the concern of my partner, President Amina Razul of the Philippines, lies on the fact in the Philippines specific realities that we're now on a third generation NAP WPS, right? So I think the discomfort of so many of us is that it continues to stay at the top. You know, I think there's a need to cascade this down to the ground, and we can only do this by not only by government doing it. Because what's happening now is that government goes down to the ground to do the cascading. No, I think as I mentioned also in my message earlier, is that we need to find more platforms to expand inclusion. No, we can have more civil society organization, even private organization, the academe, so that the WPS, as it is developed as a policy at the top, can be cascaded down and implemented in the ground. I would see the point why the Office of the Presidential Advisor would go straight to the ground in areas of very deep conflict, or in areas where there are ongoing peace implementation of programs, but to have a very inclusive and massive cascading, we need to engage civil society organization and all other sectors that are into women's program or peace implementation. Thank you.
Yes, your
Excuse
response.
me. I would like to add that I fully agree with our speaker. I forgot to tell you that everything we do in close cooperation with the civil societies and private organizations. This is true. For example, in the issue of how to respond to violence against women, as I already tell you in my presentation, when we developed the National Plan of Action, we involve many NGOs, many relevant NGOs in the implementation also, because the government is focusing more on policy, but how to deliver services. So we need to work with civil society, and we work in close cooperation, especially for referral, for counseling, and for other things. So we cannot leave the civil society apart, especially at the grassroots level. So this is that I fully agree with you that for good implementation of the women, peace and security agenda, we need collaboration of all relevant stakeholders, including civil society and the private sector. So thank you.
Thank you, Her Excellency, and thank you, Dr. Jumamil Mercado. Your responses remind me to the result of the midterm review of the in Indonesia in reviewing the implementation of UN Resolution 1325. One of the recommendation is to localize the UN Resolution 1325. The discussion, the defining of the program need to be localized at the lower level as possible, because they will be the one to define it. They will be the one to decide and what works, what doesn't work. So in Indonesia, many cities come up with the human rights city, led by the mayor or governor, or depend on the program. So they have included gradually the conversation in relation to the implementation of UN Resolution 1325, especially on the participation of women, protection, prevention, and relief and recovery. So make it clearer and let women at the grassroots level define what important for them. And that's something that already it's come up from the evaluation a couple months ago. Lilianne, do you have any ideas on this question? How to, especially the refugee community that you've been serving, how to make the implementation of the NCR CFR 1325 effective at the community level?
Thank you, Yuyun. I think I definitely agree with our two speakers, and it's very critical to be building alliances and relationships and partnerships. I mean, this is really how we get, you know, the ability to bring agendas like this down to the grassroots level. The government can't do everything, obviously, for I think for two reasons. One, because you know, as has been said, government is really responsible for policy making, but I think also because it's not always effective if at the grassroots level, if you know, an initiative seems to be government-led, it's much better if it comes through an organic process with civil society, with community leaders. I feel that you know, one of the stakeholders who we've seen to be so important in this region in initiatives around peace are religious leaders, for example. You know, religious leaders who are at the community level, who have trust of local communities because of their moral authority. These are the types of leaders that need to be engaged. And of course, you know, the interests align with, you know, governments who are supporting this agenda, with civil society. But even here, you know, in Malaysia, when we're working on quite a controversial issue, which is the refugee issue, because in Malaysia, we don't yet have a law on refugees. We tend to see that by working with religious leaders, even by working with members of parliament, you know, and leaders within their constituencies who they identify, you can find like-minded stakeholders. And, you know, these can then influence dialogue with government. They can strengthen the allies in government who are trying to advance these agendas as well. So I think we have to look creatively also in a way that, you know, makes sure that we don't see any stakeholder as being monolithic. In government, for example, you know, it's always the women in government and the ministries of women who, and perhaps the foreign ministries as well, who really see the importance of these agendas. But perhaps there are some other elements of government who, you know, need to be brought on board, who need to deepen their understanding of these issues, to be you know, become real champions of these issues as well. So I think that finding ways, and I think that this is actually one thing that you know, the COVID crisis and pandemic has allowed for. It's actually allowed for much more creative coalitions across stakeholders to be built on different types of agendas. So I do think that if, you know, if there's one positive thing that's come out of the response to the COVID crisis, it's that different actors have come across together to build coalitions. Even here in Malaysia, we've seen a lot of support for vaccinations, for example, for undocumented migrants, and even for refugees, even though we still don't have a law, you know, to manage the refugee crisis. There's a sense of we need to work together to overcome crisis, and that's a real step forward in many ways. So I think these are opportunities that we need to look at strategically and build on them to be able to advance, you know, real work and progress on the WPS agenda as well.
Thank you, Lilianne. Her Excellency, perhaps the question from Hari Myolin in regard to what kind of policies and activities should be prioritized, or should be prioritizing in Southeast Asia region next year. This is, I think, very timely question because next year Cambodia will be the chair of ASEAN.
In the region, I can answer that we are preparing the regional plan of action on women, peace, security. So for the development of this regional plan of action, we will discuss with various stakeholders so that we would like to have a comprehensive regional plan of action. So to say that we prioritize which activities, so it's a little bit hard to say, but one thing is sure is to build capacity and to create awareness of everyone to think that women peace security is not only for women, but women peace security is for all. And women peace security will benefit to everyone, men and women, boys and girls. So this is that the main thing that we want to. And the second thing in developing this regional plan of action, we will take into consideration the local context so that when we develop the regional plan of action, so it can take stock of this advancement and also to see the challenges, which maybe some are similar, some are different, but how to capture and how to promote commitment of all ASEAN member states to implement this. So it should be something which is more to their context. So this is that when we have the draft action plan, so the picture will be clearer for activity to be prioritized, because we promote discussion with all stakeholders.
Yeah.
So this is my answer to this question. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. We are looking forward for that regional plan of action.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I just want to point out that in one of our conference with the OPAR, the ASEAN Women Peace Registry, because there are member states that are not into WPS, right? For one reason or the other, it's a specific reality that there are like 3 or 4 member states that are not interested to really come up with their NAP. That's why we've been really saying that probably there's a need to have a regional plan of action for, so that we can convert it into something else. And that's when we came up with a consensus. Maybe UN Security Council 1325 may not only be NAP WPS, but it could be another affirmative document that would still carry the spirit and intent of UN Security Council 1325. So I hope His Excellency Samvada would reach out to OPAR members, because this has been in our table for quite a while on the regional plan of action, so that we can move forward on that affirmative document, especially for countries that are not into NAP WPS. I think we're all aware of this, of these countries that are not really into NAP WPS. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's look at more questions here from Colonel.
Oh, I have to answer a question there about youth in the WPS.
Oh,
Since
yes.
we are already in our 3rd generation NAP WPS, youth is already one of our inclusion, the youth WPS. So it's for the Philippine side, we already have, we're currently doing that program. OPAP, the new focal person is already handling that specific program on youth. So yes, there is. And we'd surely be sharing this with the other of our member countries.
Okay, thank you very much for that additional information. We have a question from Colonel Nursiriati Haji Sarbini. How can one be the member of the ASEAN Mediators Negotiators? Lilianne, would you like to answer this question, please? Or maybe IPR, ASEAN Institute of Reconciliation.
Yes, well, from our network, we're not actively, recruiting new members as such in terms of the members of the steering committee, but what we are doing is to reach out to partners. So definitely, I would say, there are ways that we could look at working with partners, both in terms of institutions and individuals. So I would say, you could even write to me, and then I can take it forward to the steering committee, and we can explore ways of working together on different initiatives.
Is there a need to have an endorsement from a government, country government, to apply for member?
We don't have a sort of a formal membership strategy as such and requirement. So it's not really the kind of thing you join as a member. It's more of a network which engages partners with different initiatives. So I think the best thing to do is reach out to us, to me first, and then I can connect you with the secretariat, and then we can look at perhaps particular trainings or fora that the network is going to be organizing, which we then engage interested people in. But it's not really the kind of thing where we're currently reaching out to members to actually actively join.
Okay, now we have a question from the Embassy of Switzerland in Indonesia. Okay, it's very long. It is important that all stakeholders of WPS agenda are involved in the implementation of action plans, while someone needs to coordinate the efforts. The implementation of Swiss and EP is coordinated by a working group under the leadership of National Focal Point, and responsibilities in the implementation are clearly assigned to the Ministries of Foreign Affairs, Home Affairs, Defense, and Justice. Civil society is also assigned a responsibility, and so are the Swiss missions to multilateral organizations. Question. We take note that ACW will chair the development of the ASEAN-IPR WPS, the regional plan of action. What are the strategies to get support and active engagement from the ASEAN bodies in the development and the implementation of this RPA?
So about this question, I think that the development of the regional plan of action on WPS, we will do it through many consultation with all relevant stakeholders, especially the 3 pillars, ASEAN sectoral bodies, and also civil society development partners, so that everyone, even the gender champion, so that we welcome all the inputs in order to have a regional plan of action which is comprehensive and reflect the local context and the regional context. Thank you.
Yes, just to add, more and more in ASEAN, regional plan of action had been developed by different and relevant sectoral bodies. So I think that's a kind of type of working right now to break down the silo way of working in ASEAN. So yeah, I look forward to have this regional plan of action developed and implemented by cross-sectoral and cross-pillar in ASEAN. Okay, so we have another question. Danica Gonzalez from Women and Gender Institute, WAGI. In relation to the inquiry of Ms. Amina, how can the youth already answered by Jumamil Mercado? So okay, so fine. There is another. There is a question. Is there any organization that empower women in building creativity, intelligence, and seeking opportunity in order to improve women's skill to be ready to get involved in society? I can answer this. Yes, a lot. in all ASEAN countries, we have women organizations that work with each other in different sectors: economic, development, social-cultural, law, legal skill, and many other things. Question from Colonel Nur Suryarti. What are your thoughts and views to say on on, say, implementing an annual or 2-year goal that goes toward supporting WPS initiative by respective member states. Hence, all member states are focusing on the same goal and can support each other in meeting that goal. Well, can be done, no?
Yeah.
I think it's supporting to each other. Well, my experience in ASEAN, some countries may have national plan of action, whether it is 1 year, 3 year, or 5 years, and it is very important at the regional level to define which are the areas that becoming the national competency and regional responsibilities. It is very important that regional initiative supports the national initiative, because national, local are the one that closer to the people, to the women. So yeah, I think that I'm so sorry, I'm moderator, but I answered the question.
That's okay.
I have a question, if I may, in relation to RPA. COVID-19 opened up some issues in relation to the use of digital technology, and to what extent that digitalization or digital technology have been used to undermine the framework of WPS or to advance the framework of WPS, and how this lesson learned can be reflected in the RPA, because the world that we are going to enter post-pandemic is some people call it as a new world, and digitalization is part of that world. So how this RPA, given that it is still in the process of drafting, respond to the new challenges or new opportunities provided by the digital technology?
I think that when we develop the RPA, we will take into account this digital technology, because we all live in, we are now in the ASEAN recovery framework from the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we see the challenges and opportunities arising from this COVID-19 pandemic. And as I told you that when we develop this regional plan of action, we should take all this into consideration, the local context and the regional context. So you will see how this, the life, what we call, we live in the digital area now. So we have to take into consideration the impact of COVID-19 and the opportunities of that COVID-19 can provide us, so that we can use this opportunity to build back better. And this should be emphasized in developing the regional plan of action. I'm sure that different stakeholders will provide their inputs from their mandate, and also from what we see in their work related to COVID-19, and also related to the Women, Peace and Security agenda. So for sure, we'll take this into consideration when we develop the RPA on Women, Peace, Security. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. We have another question from Valentina Cordelupi, Regional Sexual Violence Advisor from ICRC. We have heard that peacekeeping is a key area to support implementation of WPS agenda. And we know that the women participation is a crucial value, as mentioned by Cambodia. Do you think that supporting training troops on WPS related issues, protection of vulnerable groups, and how to support response and access to service in case of need can be useful action? Is ASEAN already engaged with this? As ICRC, we are aiming to integrate this component and would be glad to understand if other regional efforts are ongoing. The inclusion of training troops on WPS.
Yes, we agree that we need to support and to train women on peacekeeping operation, and also related issues and also the issues related to women peace and security, and for women in the peacekeeping operation. Cambodia has a proposal on how to train women peacekeeping, how to promote women peacekeeping, and we are looking for funding, because we agree with this that they need more training so that they can implement well their work when they are under peacekeeping operation. So thank you for this question, and we hope that we have other countries to do the same, so that we can share best practices and experiences in related to the issue of training women in peacekeeping operation. Thank you.
I'd like to add to that. In the Philippines, we have a unit within the Armed Forces of the Philippines that trains peacekeepers, whether women or men. No? But we pride ourselves for sending the first woman to lead a peacekeeping, which is a military contingent. There are peacekeeping representation before, but mostly on medical, led by women. But our first woman to head peacekeeping in Haiti, which is a military contingent, was in fact presented also to UN, to the UN in New York. She was recognized to be the first woman peacekeeper in a military contingent. She is Commodore Luz. She's a Navy officer, Commodore Luz Camacho. But when she headed the peacekeeping body in Haiti, she was only a captain, a colonel. And so she was very well recognized as the first woman to head that military. So we're in the Philippines, we can surely share a lot of best practices, because we made sure that there are women. There's always at least 20% of our delegation to be women. So that's already a conscious effort on the part of the armed forces.
Thank you. We finished all the questions and we still have 20 minutes. Is there any more question? Oh, now we have a new question. Oh no, it's only response. Say thank you to the answer. So we have all questions answered, unless there will be more questions. We still have 20 minutes before finishing this session. It has been very effective and very active webinar, I must say. And thank you very much for the all the responses. Should we stop here, organizer?
Okay.
So we don't have any more questions, or we
If there are no more questions, we can give another 30 seconds for last minute questions. Okay, no more questions. Thank you very much, participants, for the active participation and all the questions and the comments to the presentations from our speakers. Thank you, Excellency Ms. Yuyun Wahyuningrum, for moderating this afternoon's discussion. Oh yes, please, ma'am.
Let me first, as a moderator, thank the speakers. It's not on. I'm sure many participants like me got inspired with all the presentations, and whenever you make presentation, we can feel that you have passion to this topic, and it is very well acknowledged. And thank you very much for your commitment as well. I learned a lot from this webinar, and thank you for participants for your active participation. I would like to give back to Kartika IIPR, ASEAN Institute for Peace and Reconciliation, please.
Thank you, Excellency Yuyun Wahyuningrum. Of course, from the ASEAN-IPR, we would also like to thank our distinguished speakers for their presentations and for answering all the questions posed by the audience. We express our sincere appreciation to all attendees in Zoom and viewers on YouTube who have followed the discussion from beginning to end. And also you can review today's discussion on the ASEAN-IPR YouTube channel. We also like to thank the Embassy of Ireland and the Embassy of Finland in Jakarta for their generous support towards the ASEAN-IPR Discussion Series 2021. Before we close, we would just like to do a small announcement as it is a special day for the Secretariat. We would like to wish our Communications Officer, Mr. Rifat Fahir, happy birthday. Mr. Rifat, happy birthday. Happy forever 25.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies. Thank you for joining our discussion this afternoon. We hope to see you again in the next discussion series. In the meantime, please stay safe and healthy. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, excellency.